Well, welcome everyone. I am Katie, the manager at Chevalier's, and I am thrilled to welcome you all to our store virtually. It is a delight to get to represent the oldest independent bookstore in Los Angeles, and especially for this evening to be joined by such a delightful pair. I've gotten to listen to Lee and Saïd chit-chatting and catching up, and I'm like, I think we all have a fantastic evening ahead of us, and I cannot wait for everyone to enjoy it. I have like two pieces of business for everyone. The first is that this is going to be recorded. It is recording now. So if during the Q&A session, you have a question and you want it to be relatively anonymous, that's fine. We'll do our best to make sure that happens, but just know that if you choose to participate in a more visible way, it will be recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel, which is also helpful. If anybody you know wishes they could have attended, if you're bragging about this afterward and people are disappointed they weren't here, you can direct them to our website and to our YouTube channel where they will get to relive the magic of this evening. And I'm also going to put into the chat the link to where you can buy, wait, I came prepared, where you can buy House of Sticks from Chevalier's with signed book plates. So you will be able to get a signed copy of House of Sticks if you order from us. And that will go up in the chat as soon as I'm done talking, so I can start typing. And now I am so excited to introduce to you, I'll bring it back, Lee Tran, author of House of Sticks, her debut memoir. Here, I'm gonna bring her on screen. Yay, hi Lee. And with her, I've been practicing. We'll see if I do this right. With her, her former teacher, Saïd Sayrafiezadeh, which pretty close, I think.
No, that you nailed it, Katie. Excellent. Nailed it. Amazing.
I'm so happy to have you both here. I'm so excited for everyone to get to hear you in conversation with each other. And I should also mention Saïd, in addition to teaching Lee, is an author himself. He has a memoir, When Skateboards Will Be Free, a short story collection, Brief Encounters with the Enemy, and an upcoming collection, American Estrangement. This is Lee's debut. So we only get to brag a bunch about this one, but it is great. And I can't wait for you all to get a chance to read it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Saïd.
So congratulations, Lee. I'm happy to be talking to you about the book. And as I said to you in the few minutes before I started, I mean, it's powerful, it's moving, it's disturbing, it's insightful, it's eye-opening, it's all of these things. And I want to hear you read a little bit from it. I was actually thinking from the preface, just so that we can get a sense of what's going on. But before we do, this is your debut book. And what's it been like? You know, you've been writing this book, and now here it is, and it's going out into the world. And there's a little bit of an extra thing because it's also your life that you're putting out there. Yeah. What's that feel like now that this is all happening and you put your life on the page and now it's out for people to read about?
Oh gosh, what does it feel like? How do I even answer that? Well, I mean, it's just this incredible journey of just pouring my heart and soul into this, and hoping to write myself to a place of freedom in a way. And I think I did that, and I feel liberated.
When you say write yourself to a place of freedom, what exactly does that mean?
I think, for a long time, I let my past define me in so many ways. And I thought that by being able to write my past and put it on the page, that I could finally extricate myself from it and start to reinvent myself.
When you talk about the past, I mean, where you're talking about childhood, your childhood experiences that you feel, and you mentioned in the book that you do feel that it's that it haunts you. Specifically, what exactly from the childhood is what you wanted? What did you specifically want to extricate yourself from?
I think from a place of blame and shame. For a long time, I was sort of ashamed of my upbringing, ashamed of my poverty, and poverty in so many ways, not just in a monetary sense, but poverty of identity. Also, I couldn't see for a large portion of my life, and that led to this deep sense of shame, and I was really upset and blamed my parents for the neglect. My father didn't allow me to wear glasses, unfortunately, because he suffered from PTSD from being a prisoner of war for almost 10 years. And his trauma meant that he thought glasses were a government conspiracy to take away my eyesight. So he didn't let me wear glasses. So for a long time, I floundered in school, I floundered in life. And that haunted me for a while. And being able to put that all on the page and make sense of my past, not just my past, but my father's past, and the inherited trauma of the war, the Vietnam War, that allowed me to really finally connect the dots of my life and be able to forgive.
I know the answers to these questions that I'm about to ask, but I'm just wondering if it would be useful. Can we get a little bit of a timeline and of, because I mean, there's so many interesting things that are happening in your book. And like the fact that you just said your dad was in the war and he was a prisoner. So, I mean, the book begins roughly when you arrive in the United States, although you're actually, I guess, there's actually camps that you're in prior to coming to the US. So how old are you when you arrive in the United States?
I'm 3 years old, so that was in 1993.
Right, and you're coming with mom, dad, and 3 brothers, right? Right,
Yeah.
And dad was in the Vietnam War. He was also in prison.
Yes.
For how many years?
So he was actually in prison for about 7 years, but the sentence itself was 10 years. And so after he was released from prison, he had to serve the remaining 3 years doing, hard labor for the government.
And this is, you are obviously born after his prison sentence, right? And, but you talk, I mean, one of the things I think that's really interesting and powerful is the lasting effects of, and, speaking of, there's an irony in that you could not see, and we're talking like literally you could not see from a very young age until, well, you had contacts in high school. Was it high school or college when you finally got contacts?
Well, I mean, there was that one teacher who helped me get glasses. He purchased me a pair of eyeglasses when I was in 9th grade, but my eyesight deteriorated quickly after that, so the glasses were completely useless. But it wasn't until when I was 18 that my brother purchased me a pair of, a box of contacts.
And then you're in college when you get LASIK surgery.
Yes, exactly.
And by the way, how is the eyesight now? How?
It's perfect.
Is it perfect? Oh my God.
Funny.
You know what? I'm so jealous, Lee, because my eyesight is actually now going. Oh. And I have glasses, which I am embarrassed to ever wear. So I was empathizing with the situation. But one of the just sort of poetic ironies of the book is the person who cannot see literally, you have incredible insight into what you grew up with. And one of the things is the generational trauma that's passed down from what your father experienced in the war. And even in terms of the glasses, where he says, or he's imagining it, that it is a government conspiracy. I mean, he suffers from paranoia and will not allow you to get them. And I thought that was to be able to trace these things back and to try to figure out the understanding of where they come from is one of the real highlights of the book. But why don't we read just from the preface? I say we, but I mean you. Just it's like the first page and a half where the book opens. And it's called Awake. You've titled it Awake.
Yes. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
A din of nervous voices, a shuffle of restless bodies, a dome of bright blue tarp. It was nighttime. I was hungry, fretful, struggling out of my mother's arms. My father had gone to trade a ceramic bowl for eggs with soy sauce. We sat on narrow, overcrowded benches waiting for him. My senses were just beginning to activate, some more than others. Vision dominated, and smell. I remember the strong odor of eggs drenched in soy sauce as my father entered the tent and carried the food back to us, and the vague presence of blurry, faceless people all around. I don't remember my three brothers being there. I knew only that we were not in a familiar place, and that shock of unfamiliarity is perhaps what has preserved this earliest memory of mine, sitting on a bench in a tarpaulin tent in a refugee camp in Thailand. I was 3 years old, only vaguely conscious of the world around me. But in that singular moment, it was as though a light had flickered on in the uncharted rooms of my mind. I have no recollection of the moments before, of how I got there, or of what came after. But the blue remains. I can almost touch it, a country of blue as big as Antarctica, frozen in the geography of my consciousness. And the eggs. I can still taste those eggs. Rubbery whites infused with soy sauce and a creamy yolk at the center. I know from what my parents have told me in the years since that we stayed in that camp for 3 weeks. Then we boarded planes that took us from Thailand to Denmark, from Denmark to France, from France to America. From that time, I remember only hazy glimpses of airports and an isolated sensation of burning coldness, but nothing lasting, nothing of shape. My father tells me that on the plane ride from France to America, he'd awakened to find that I was gone. Panicked, he and my mother searched the plane, approaching the stewards and stewardesses in their broken English. Excuse me, where is baby? They cradled an invisible baby in their arms. Turns out, I had waddled down the aisle to an empty seat and curled up at its base to sleep. I, of course, have no recollection of this. I was asleep. But sometimes I think I remember it. I see myself as a toddler, walking down the aisle beneath the unseeing gaze of strangers. I remember dim lighting and a sudden sensation of dizziness, of crawling into a quiet, empty space. Then I feel strong arms encircle me and carry me back to my family. I feel the weight of sleep descend upon me once again.
Leah, that's great.
Thank you.
You talk about being 3 years old. I mean, I don't know everybody here who's watching, if you think it's unusual to have memories from 3 years old. I don't know if anybody else does. Do you have, is memory something that's very strong in you? you remember back? I mean, and what I love about the beginning also is that you also acknowledge things that you don't remember. So some of this was told to you as well from mom, I'm assuming from mom and dad over the years, yes?
Right.
Yeah. But do you, do you consider yourself having a very good memory?
I think so. You know, I can remember things from a very long time ago. I still remember where I sat in every single one of my classes from kindergarten onward. So, yeah.
Does that run in the family at all? Or like, do family members marvel at that? Or do they also have very strong memories?
You know, I would say my brother Long, we talk about this all the time, but he says he has a terrible memory. You know? I think my Fu and my mom have an excellent memory for sure. I don't know about Tin. I have to ask him.
Do you think memory has anything to do with being a memoirist for you?
I think so. Although I don't know. I don't think one necessarily needs to have a good memory, but just to have a good sense of the world around them and to be able to tap into that sense when they write.
Because one of the things we were talking about and that I know about you is that you started off as a fiction writer. You studied it at Columbia. For everybody here, I mean, I met Lee in I was teaching a nonfiction class at NYU that she took one summer, way back in 2013. You said you had taken one other nonfiction class, is that right, when you were at Columbia?
Yes.
But your thing was, and you write about this in the book, that you're taking fiction and I think you're thinking about a novel. Does that come up in? Yeah. So you're thinking about writing a novel. Why the shift? Why a memoir then?
Oh, that's actually really funny. So, you know, I was working on a novel that was loosely based on my life. I was drawing from, you know, my real life experiences to write this. You know, the idea of a novel was just beginning to form. And then I took your wonderful class. I was actually in another fiction class in this Writers in New York course, but I didn't quite jive with that class. So I asked to be switched over to nonfiction where I met you. And so I submitted, you know, I emailed you asking if you could take a look at some of my pages that I was working on. And, you know, you said you didn't have time to read it.
I'm so generous. Such a generous response.
But, you know, you invited me to your office hours and we discussed my plans as a writer. And I told you that I was writing a novel loosely based on my life. And you said, but why? You said, Lee, this is a great story. You've got a great life story. You said that you sometimes get your nails done, you get manicures, and you often wondered about the life of a manicurist. And, you know, you wished me the best of luck. And I think something like the next day or the next week, your agent emailed me and said, hey, Lee, Saïd forwarded us your pages and we would love to represent you. So that's when I met Sarah, my agent. I met her the following week. And she said, the first thing she said to me was, Lee, this must be a memoir. Because
why must it be a memoir?
I don't know. She just said that it would be so much more powerful as a memoir. She said, why not make it a memoir if this is something you lived? And it means so much to others to know that this is a true story.
It seems like some stories need a little bit something extra from the writer to make them a full, complete story. And sometimes we're lucky enough that we actually have something that can just be told as it was. I mean, I know for myself that there are things I write from true life, but I still need to fictionalize it because it's just not quite enough just to be the truth. It's got to be the truth plus something else to make it. But I mean, I would agree with Sarah. I mean, your story on its own carries so much weight. So one of the things you just brought up was the nail salon. what is that? What was the nail salon? You were a customer in a nail salon? Like, tell us what the nail salon was. What's the history of the nail salon?
Yeah, well, I guess we have to talk a little bit about the sweatshop labor first.
Yes, we do.
So when, I was 3 when I first came to America with my family, and we needed to find a way to make ends meet immediately. Not least of all because we came through the IRC, through this government program known as the humanitarian operation, and they helped us buy these plane tickets to come to America. But the catch was that we actually had to pay the IRC back for these plane tickets. So we had to we were already in debt upon entering this country, and we had to find a way to pay this money back.
Do you have any idea how much it was? Do you remember how much it?
Yeah, $1,800.
It was 18 total, 1,800 for everybody.
300 per person.
Per person.
And so a family friend said, hey, some of the Vietnamese people in this area, we're doing this thing where there's this company that will ship you fabric and you make whatever they tell you to make, and you get paid for it. And we thought, oh, this is wonderful because we get to work at home with the family and wouldn't really have to go out and navigate this new society that we find ourselves in. So we did that for a time until I was about 12, and that's when the work dried up. I think the operation was found out and it was shut down. And so we were again sort of at a loss for how to make ends meet. And we went to this Buddhist temple that my family and I often go to every Sunday. And the people there said, hey, why don't you enter the nail salon industry? All the Vietnamese people are doing it. We basically run the industry. So give it a try. And, my parents took their suggestion, took their advice, and we started to practice doing nails. And eventually we worked for this nail salon in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And the owner said, hey, do you want to take over? I'm kind of tired and I want to retire. And I would love to transfer this over to you. So that's where the nail salon comes in.
Yeah. And you worked in the nail salon?
Yes. I worked with my mother from the age of 13 to about, I want to say 20.
By the way, everybody here, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. We'll just take them as we see them. So feel free. One of the things about writing a memoir, Lee, I think what comes with the territory is you've put your life out there. So now here comes like you're an open book, no pun intended. So, but you said, it was interesting the way you phrased it. You said, we worked for a time doing the work at home, the garment work, but for a time sounds like 9 years. If my math is correct, is that right? From the time you basically arrived in the United States.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, sorry. No. I was from the age of 3 to about 12. We did this sweatshop labor as a family. We had like this little assembly line, and we were making ties and cummerbunds and flight attendant scarves. And it was something like for every 24 ties we made, we would earn $1.
How many ties could you make in a day or in an hour?
Oh gosh, I mean, it would depend, but we made a lot. The chapter is entitled 20,000 cummerbunds for a reason. We were just making thousands of these, depending on the week, we would just churn it out.
And you literally mean you as well.
Yeah. I remember from the age of 3, learning how to, it's funny, I'm 3 or 4 years old with this blade, and it's a pretty sharp blade, and I'm just like cutting the fabrics and yeah. Here's the power of Zoom. The magic of Zoom is we cannot be in person, but we are seeing into each other's homes. I'm happy to describe my apartment to you if you want, but Lee, actually there is something interesting about where you are. It's like, what's that apartment that you're in? So I'm I'm actually living in the same apartment building that I write about in my book, the same apartment building that I immigrate to from, Vietnam to America. Um, it's 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 funny because I think I might have even put my address down in the book, which
That's
probably
funny.
the wisest thing to do. But hopefully nobody's going to come.
So this is the building you grew up in.
Uh-huh.
And mom and dad are still there.
Yes. And it's funny because that's one of the things that made it difficult to write this memoir, in the sense that I was still very much living the life that I was writing about. Here I am in the same apartment building. I have this very complicated relationship with my parents. So not only do they live upstairs in my mind metaphorically, but they live upstairs physically. And so, finding that distance to write this memoir while I was here made it very challenging.
And what is that like to be writing about, family? And I don't think you pull punches, Lee, when you talk about mom and dad. It's one of the things that makes the book great is you're very candid and you're very real about their flaws. I don't think it's gratuitous, but now you're putting this out for people to read. I mean, was there ever any reservations about that? How is it possible to be so honest about mom and dad?
That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like I just decided to write it, and I wanted to believe that their love for me was stronger than any kind of conceived notion that they had about how I portrayed them in this book. And I would like to believe that I portrayed them with the best of intentions. I portrayed them, I told the truth, but I also told it with love.
Well, here's a question, and I was going to ask the same thing, but the question is, have they read it? Have they read the book?
That's a good question. I mean, it's almost not fair. Maybe I'm cheating by writing this book because they don't speak English very well. I do tell them what I write about. At the very beginning of the process, I told them, hey, I'm going to tell the truth. Good times and bad times, and I basically just laid it out for them, and they said, you know what, it's okay. You do what you need to do.
Wow.
We're going to be here. And that, I'm going to get emotional, but it just means so much to me. And it's just yet another testament to their love for me. But to answer your question, my mother is actually on Duolingo every day for the past few months. And she's really trying to learn English so she can read my book. And I am just blown away by how much progress she's made. Because, she'll come to me and she'll say, hey, Lee, I got through another chapter. Is this what you wrote about? And she would just tell it to me in Vietnamese. And I'd say she gets like 75% of the chapter, which is incredible.
That's what I was wondering, if mom and dad can read and write English. And so your mom is actually learning. And does your dad read or write English?
Not really. I'm sure he can if he tried and put his mind to it, but he's almost not interested. It's enough for him that I wrote this book, and it's enough for him that that he is in it, and I tell the truth, and that's it.
Why the title?
The title, oh gosh. So it's definitely a multi-layered title. I think first and foremost, it is basically about the house of sticks that I grew up in, or that I was born in Vietnam, because we lived in these houses made out of sticks and leaves. And then when we came here to America with all the hopes of attaining the American dream, we instead became the sticks ourselves, because we were so malnourished and poor. So that's basically the first two meanings. And then the third meaning is the house of sticks and the three little pigs. Oftentimes we hear about the house of straw and we hear about the house of bricks, but that middle house is rarely talked about. And I wanted to just highlight that as the journey, you know, and how sometimes, no matter how hard we try, it's almost impossible to rise up out of our circumstances. And so that second house, you know, the owner of that second house thought that he would fare much better than the first pig. But in the end, his house was also blown down. And so that's sort of a metaphor for how flimsy our foundation here in America was as immigrants and refugees.
Yeah, it's incredibly tenuous, so much. I mean, and the poverty that you describe is extreme. And even what you slept on, Lee, which was,
Yeah, basically straw mats in the beginning.
in your apartment on the
Right.
floor.
Yes.
There's a question here. It says, I find it interesting that you said, I told my parent. By the way, I hope can you see the chat? Because you're getting a lot of like,
Yeah,
very
I just
affectionate.
noticed it.
Yeah. So I find it interesting that you said, quote, I told my parents I'm going to write this book, and not, I told my parents that I wrote this book. It seems that you had the insider drive to write this, but discussed it with your family before actually starting. Is that a fair assessment? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I'd love to hear about how this came about. So the inspiration for this story, for this book, came about, I think in college when before Columbia, I actually had gone to Hunter College. I was in the honors program there. And I, unfortunately, because of all the trauma that I had suffered, I fell into a really deep and dark depression that eventually led to my dropping out of school. And I floundered for about 2 years. I basically pretended to go to school every day so that my parents would never find out. I would leave my house at the same time every day and come back at the same time. And I made up this whole fake roster of courses and said, oh yeah, I'm taking, psychology and whatever. But I just didn't go to school for 2 years until I met this wonderful person. Her name is Pamela Vandermeulen, who said, you have so much potential. You need to go back to school. And, I sort of laughed at her and said, who would accept me after dropping out with a 2.0 GPA, essentially? And she said, well, let's just get you back on your feet first. Let's get you a job so that these schools will know that you're serious about coming back. And there are programs out there that will let you explain your story, and you've got a story to tell. And I said, sure. And one of the schools that she convinced me to apply to was the School of General Studies at Columbia. So it's for non-traditional students specifically who either took a gap year or were figure skaters or just had a story to tell. And part of the application process was this personal statement explaining why you're a non-traditional student. So I applied and I wrote this essay about basically my life as a Vietnamese immigrant, and it ended up being 9,000 words. And I said, okay, I have nothing to lose by applying to these colleges, except maybe a bruised ego. And Columbia was the only school to accept me out of about 10 schools that I applied to. And when I received the phone call offering me a seat at Columbia, the person on the other end said that the admissions board accepted me on the strength of my essay. And so when I met my dean, she said, Lee, if you haven't thought about it, maybe you should consider being a writer. So I don't know, Alan, if that answers your question, but that's how this all came about.
But and was that the first time you thought about being a writer?
First time, I think in the 9th grade, I read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Okay.
And this was for Miss Lou's class, and she's in the book, an amazing person. And it was the first time that a book ever made me cry. I so related to Pecola Breedlove, who is the little girl in the book. And she wished for a new pair of eyes. Granted, it was a pair of blue eyes, but I was reading this book and I thought, oh my God, like I want a new pair of eyes too. And after crying, after seeing how powerful words could be, I remember thinking to myself, gosh, I hope that one day I could make somebody cry with my words. And so I don't know, maybe people cry. Maybe I'll make people.
So Lee, is it that you want to, it sounds like a motivating force is to evoke emotion in someone else.
Yes, I think so. I think to me that's so powerful. Anything that moves me is powerful, and I'm always looking to be moved. And I want people to feel what I feel when I'm moved.
Well, listen, I mean, one of the things is that speaking of moving people, quote unquote, your dad and to a big extent your mom were not very movable. The way you portrayed is that there was not a whole lot of empathy coming from them for what you were having to experience.
Right. Well, I think, that's the funny part is initially I didn't think there was empathy. Initially, I thought it was just neglect. I thought my father was just, irrational and my mother was too submissive. But ultimately, I realized that they just loved me, and this was how they showed their love. I mean, my father truly thought that the government was trying to take away my eyesight, So if as a father, he saw that and was just scared. And he's coming from Vietnam, war-torn Vietnam, and my brothers had all been very sick at some point, almost to the point of death. And he just wanted his children to be healthy. And for him, his daughter wearing a pair of eyeglasses would mean that he failed as a father. And he just didn't want to accept that, to the point where he refused me those glasses. So I think, it seems like there wasn't any empathy, but now that I can understand their motivations, it's almost like a very perverse form of empathy and love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds like the way it is love, but there is a perverse quality to it, because you do talk about physical abuse. You're candid about that in the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just part of the culture, honestly. I know so many people who, also Vietnamese or Asian or a lot of immigrant families, actually. They, if I tell them, oh yeah, I was beaten as a kid, they would say, oh yeah, me too. It's almost, it's very pervasive, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, here's a segue, and this is from David, and he says,
hi, David.
He says, the first person present tense is so immediate and exciting, but it's funny, a memoir story that doesn't acknowledge its memory. How was that choice made? Was it limiting?
Oh, that's fascinating. Actually, that first chapter is when I tried to cue the reader into the fact that this is a memoir, and that I am, in fact, an unreliable narrator, in the sense that there will be moments in which memory is unreliable, and for everyone, memory is reconstructive. So I wanted to hint at that in the beginning, just to kind of get that out of the way, but then to really immerse the reader in this story, because for me, storytelling is so powerful, and it's something that has been a coping mechanism for me all throughout my life. One of the stories that my father, or that made me want to become a storyteller, is the fact that when my father was in prison, he saved this turtle's life, because a fellow prisoner had caught this turtle in a trap. And so he felt bad for the turtle and traded that turtle for some scallions that he had been growing. And he set that turtle free. 3 days later, he was set free from prison. And I remember hearing this story when I was younger, and it seemed like a story that he was telling to us. And it didn't occur to me until later that this was a story that he lived. And so I wanted to give that same effect to my readers. I wanted to just tell the story as though it were just a story, and for readers to later realize, oh, this is a life that she lived.
And speaking of that turtle, that comes back later in your life. The object of the turtle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a dear friend of mine, Alex, she gave me this turtle, this stuffed turtle, after hearing how much I love turtles. Actually, a lot of my friends know that I love turtles, but I think maybe this chapter will be the first time that they learn about why I love turtles so much. But yeah, it's just something that I've held on to all my life, because I want to believe that there's a turtle out there protecting me as well, the same way that it protected my father.
Do you still have the stuffed turtle?
I am very sad to say no, because yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like it's with me, but I think my father might have, he's sort of like an anti-clutter person, and he throws away all my things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But
hey, I was going to say, when Katie first introduced us, and I'm used to having my name mispronounced, and Katie actually got it completely right.
Yes.
But so I was going to use her mispronunciation as a segue to talk about your name, because you have had your name mispronounced. You talk about that.
Yes.
Lie, people call you Lie. I think, or Lisa, or do you sometimes go by Lisa? I can't remember what it actually.
No, well, you know, my citizenship says Lee, AKA Lisa. And so that's my American name, but I never go by Lisa.
And your mom went by Diane, I believe.
Yes.
But you never changed your name. And I think you say your brothers, a couple of your brothers changed their names. They Americanized.
Yes, my two older brothers.
And do you have any thoughts about why you would stick with your name? Why not go with a name that was American?
I think I just wanted to stay connected to my roots. There's this sense, you know, even though I talked initially at the beginning of this session that I wanted to extricate myself from the past, but there is a part of me that wants to stay connected to my roots, ironically. And so I never want to change my name. And, you know, maybe part of that also is that my name is just easy, you know? But in the book, I talk a lot about the mispronunciation of my name as Lie, which is particularly ironic, because here I am trying to tell the truth. I'm trying to tell the truth in a memoir. And yet all throughout my life, people have called me Lie. So yeah. that's like the second big irony, that and the eyesight, not being able to see and yet having deep insight. Do you speak Vietnamese? Yes, for sure.
Was that something that, well, I guess because mom and dad, they don't really speak English terribly well. So you would have been raised in a home that spoke strictly Vietnamese. Right. That was another interesting thing, because lives are complicated. And I mean, even you saying there's parts of the past that you want to extricate yourself from, and then there's actually parts that you want to remain connected to. This is like basically life. Like, it's not so simple of like, we can just want to either write everything off. We want to like keep some parts of it. But another thing I think that there's like a wrinkle in the book is that you are actually you're actually Chinese by way of Vietnam.
Right.
Does that figure into any of your identity as an adult now? Like, do you think of yourself as Vietnamese, as Chinese, or is that immaterial to you?
That's a good question. You know, I don't ever consider myself anything other than human.
Really?
Yeah. You know, I understand that in society, we must take on these sort of superficial markers of identity. But when I think of myself, I only think of myself as human. And all these other aspects are just superficial to me. So it is immaterial. Yeah.
So, and listen, I'm asking because these are things that I've wrestled with about what my identity is. And so, for instance, have you been to Vietnam? Is that something you'd be interested in? Yes.
Yeah, I've been to Vietnam.
You have been.
Yes, twice now, or three times. And I love Vietnam.
Have you been to China? Does that hold any interest for you?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to go to China. I would love to just travel the world, to be honest.
So you're not saying it's necessarily connected to what your ethnic background is at all about wanting to say go to China?
Yeah, I guess not.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested, to learn about my roots for sure, but it's not so much the main thing that's drawn me there.
That's not the driving force.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question that just came in. Oddly enough, it says it's from Lee Tran.
Yes. Hi, Lee.
Who is this?
She's my sister.
Is this your sister?
Sister.
Oh my God. Hi, sister. Wait a minute, it doesn't say no relation.
Lee, oh my goodness. She just threw me under the bus there.
So this says there are so many similarity in Lee's family background and mine as Chinese descent, born in Vietnam. By the way, is this a joke? Is this your sister or no? Well, you don't have a sister. No. Okay, this is like a sister. Okay, right.
Yeah.
It's another layer of struggle in exposing the family struggle of Chinese Vietnamese. It was also very difficult to write my memoir. The only difference is I am much older than Lee and always declare that I am Chinese from Vietnam. Okay, so she has a whole different take than what your angle is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when people do ask me what my ethnicity is, I also say that I'm Chinese. I mean, I'm 7/8 Chinese. that's a lot.
Yeah.
Chinese. So I do say I'm Chinese, but I was born in Vietnam. Yeah. But everyone should check out her memoir. It's called I Did Not Miss the Boat, and it's also such a harrowing story.
Way to plug somebody else on your book. That's great. That's so generous. You're so generously. We have like 10 minutes left, so I just want to make sure if there she goes. She says, yes, I'm 100% Chinese. If other people have questions for Lee, by all means, get them in. Hey, Lee, I'm going to ask you a question that I hate getting, but so now I get to do it to you. What are you thinking about writing next, if anything, or maybe you've already started?
I have started, actually. So after spending about 8 years working on nonfiction, I think I'm gonna go back to what I initially intended, which is fiction. So I'm actually working on a historical novel that's set in 40 AD. So we're going way, way back in history. I'm gonna need to do a ton of research. Might take me another 8 years to complete this.
You said 40
Yeah,
AD?
40 AD.
Okay.
And when I was younger and I told people that I was Vietnamese or from Vietnam, they would always say, oh, you mean like the Vietnam War? And, these are just kids. But
Yeah.
it always bothered me that people saw Vietnam as this war, as synonymous with this war. And then I came to find out later on that there was another war in 40 AD that is incredible. So these two, this is after millennia of Chinese domination. And these two Vietnamese sisters, they join the army and they rise up in the ranks and become generals. And together they take back, they lead the first successful revolt against China and take back Vietnam's independence. They're known as the Trung sisters, and they reigned over Vietnam. They were the first queens of Vietnam from 40 to 43 AD. And this is 100% true story, and no one has ever heard of it. And I would love to be the first
Fantastic.
on that story.
How did you hear of it?
There's like a national festival that happens every year called the Trung Sisters Festival in Vietnam. So, Vietnamese people, we know this story. It's just like, it's part of the lore that we grow up with. And I'm just so fascinated by it, and I'm shocked that nobody has thought to make a story out of this. So maybe they have, but hopefully I can really bring it to the world.
What's different about writing a novel than writing a memoir?
I think I'm ready to sort of have fun and play around with things and be creative. There was certainly a lot of creativity that went into this memoir, but now I would like to just sort of let go of the facts a little bit,
But you're also adhering to something. You haven't gone straight to let's just make everything up.
That's true.
You're going back to fact as well. What are some of the similarities?
Well, I think because it's already a story, so it's a little easier for me to make that jump, or that foray into fiction. I guess the similarities must be that I intend to infuse a lot of who I am into this narrative the same way that I have into the memoir. And I think writers in general do that, no matter how fictional a story is, there's still the author's or the artist's signature within those pages.
We've got, and by the way, Tracy, I'm sorry, because these questions came up earlier. So let's do them now. So this is 2 questions. And the first one is, there was a turning point in your memoir where you decide to move unapologetically forward rather than letting yourself be defined by what happened to you in the past. How did that choice impact your relationship with your family, both then and now? And then here, I'll just give you the second part too. It says, why did you decide to end the book where you ended it?
Okay, so for the first question, I think, there was a point in my life when all I did was, I was just filled with like this sort of hatred and anger towards my parents. And I was blaming them for everything that was going wrong in my life. And this is, when I was at Hunter, and I was really depressed and at some point suicidal. It was a really difficult time for me. And I was finally able to see, but I had never felt more blind in my life. And so I was at some point
literally able to see.
Yeah, well, this is
Right.
because I'd gotten the contacts from my brothers.
Exactly.
So I couldn't understand why, if I was able to see, why I wasn't doing well in school and why I was failing. And I was so angry. And then all of a sudden, I think one day I came to the conclusion that I didn't want to be angry anymore, that I didn't want to blame anyone anymore, and just sort of take control of my life. And so I made this crucial decision to drop out of Hunter, because I thought that if I could fail on my own terms, not on anybody else's terms, and not blame anyone, and the only person I would have to blame is me, if I could fail on my own terms, then I could succeed on my own terms as well. And I think by doing that I think I owe so much of my success to that decision, and so much of this incredible relationship that I now have with my family because of that decision. I think it was very easy for me to live in that blame, live in that guilt, possibly for the rest of my life, but I didn't want to. And so I chose this path of self-love, which I was able to then give to my parents and my family overall. And
then the last part, and could you tell us how it ends? It says, because the second question is, why did you decide to end the book where you ended it?
Sure. I mean, is this a spoiler for the people who haven't?
Oh, that's a good question.
But I'll tell you, yeah, so I won't say, oh, no, okay, no spoilers. But I will tell you that the last chapter is one of the first chapters that I wrote. And the reason for that is that I wanted to write myself to that ending. I knew that that's where I wanted to end up in my, not just in the book, but in my life as well. So I wrote that chapter, and you know, hoping that my words would somehow carry me there. And so I would say that it has carried me to that ending.
You're getting a lot of nice well wishes. So Lee, we only have a few minutes left, and is there anything that we have? Oh, well, here's one. How did you decide how you? Well, that's a big one. Can you do that in 2.5 minutes? How did you decide how you would structure the memoir?
I'm going to try. Okay, so
Yeah,
the initial structure that I came up with a long time ago was to structure the memoir through the steps of a manicure. And each step would be linked, would be a set of chapters that were linked thematically. So the first step was remove old nail polish. And that would be basically chapters that were about my attempts to extricate myself from the past and try to understand my father's past as well. And then the second set of chapters would be cut, file, and buffer nails. And it would be all about our attempts at assimilation into American society, you know, cutting and filing the nail so that it would look uniform. And I think that structure was really instrumental in allowing me to figure out what the major themes and motifs of the memoir would be. But ultimately, the narrative grew beyond that structure, and I eventually had to let it go and just tell my story chronologically. How's that? Was that good? That was 2 minutes.
sounds great. Yes, you did it. You did it. All right. I don't know whoever else is on the East Coast, but it's 11 p.m. here for Lee and I. And I know people on the West Coast, it's only 8 p.m. So you still have some more night ahead of you. Lee, I want to congratulate you again. And on a personal level, listen, I was there at the beginning. I was initially very ungenerous, didn't have time to read it, but this is where we have arrived at now. So, and it's a real honor to share this evening with you. And also, by the way, can you see everybody about, if you want to get signed books, you can order them from Chevalier's, and the link is in the chat there. All right, Katie, are you going to come back on, or are we just going to sign off here? Is Katie? Hey, Katie.
Hello, I
Okay.
figured. I would like to thank Lee and Saïd both for joining us this evening. It was even more delightful than I had expected, having gotten to hear the two of you catch up prior to the event starting. And I'd love to thank all of you who joined us this evening from all over the place. Thank you for hanging out with us virtually in Los Angeles by way of two speakers in New York. Thank you again. You can
Thank you, Katie.
Oh,
Thank you.
my pleasure. And this evening will be up on our YouTube channel in a few days, and you can find all of that at our website, chevaliersbooks.com. I will put the link one last time to the books that you can order that are signed. And thank you all again. Have a great night. Enjoy bedtime, all of you on the East Coast.
Good night, everybody. Thanks
Staying
everybody
up
for
with
coming.
us.
Thank you so much, Saïd, and thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining. I love you all. All righty.